Welcome back to the Paper Valley. In this part of the series, we will talk about the skills that you can use and learn at the club. After all, the club isn't just for running trains. The skills here can help you increase your knowledge in the hobby, and in some cases help you in life in general. Woodwork and plastering is essential as it's what the layout and features rest on. Having an unstable or incorrectly made base may cause problems. How do you make sure that wood parts are the correct size for the layout, and how do you make sure that they are stably put in and secured?
Basically for the size on there, I mean, it's an HO, so we're kind of looking for 1/87th actual scale. You can't put a mile of Appleton's downtown in 10 feet, otherwise you got a ratio of what, 5,280 to 10. So that's like 1 in 600 to 1 or something. That won't work. So you gotta give up things. The first thing you want to do is make sure your track is in and sound and working right. We never had a decent track drawing of this room, so we went all the way back and measured the room. Here's what we got to work with. So we made some scale drawings and kind of went from there. We redid the foundation because what we had out here, there was a lot of foam construction, which is fine, but there was no wood underneath it. So if you pushed hard enough, you would bust right through.
How do you work on a live layout? So when people want to run but you're working on it, how do you work on it without interrupting the running too much?
Good question. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we say, okay, can you just avoid this area? So we've already done it. We've put blocks of foam on the end of the track, like when we were doing a lot of the heavier construction work and actually rebuilding the track. We basically put foam over the end of the track and said, you can't go any farther, sorry. So there was a period of time in there, yeah, where the main line was down, and that was tough. You had to figure out how to run your railroad without that. But like today, we were in here and we stained our road crossings, and we just have to watch for trains, and the guys that are running, we kind of let them know we're going to be working, so there might be a period of a time where you gotta, okay, go the other way or avoid the area. But yeah, sometimes it's a challenge, but we're pretty good out here. If you've really got something that you need to shut the main line down, Wednesday's kind of our non-running day. So if a guy can do it and work on Wednesday out here, that works out good too. There's two ways to do it. Use an NMRA track gauge and clearance gauge. The other way is find the biggest car you got on your layout. Usually it's a passenger car. Put those on there and make sure they don't drag against something when they go around a corner. There are some rough guidelines that you use. You're going to set what's your minimum radius you're going to use. When we did Appleton, we basically took it right down to the 2x4s, because what we had in here, we had some problems over the years, so we wanted to correct it. As far as clearances, we're running trains every day and making sure that things work right. If we have to, we'll get a different tunnel portal or a different bridge or whatever to make sure the clearances are right.
Being good at woodwork and plastering will allow you to bring your ideas to life easier. For life in general, it may make home improvement projects easier and open the doors to new hobbies like furniture making. Making the track for the layout has come a long way since the club was formed. Back then, ties and rails would be stapled down by hand. Now, track mostly comes pre-made. Let's see how the track and powering system has changed. When would you use hand-laid track as opposed to pre-made track?
Pre-made track is great for pretty much every instance. Like right here, we've got a pair of diamonds, which are crossings of rails from one side to another. They can be store-bought, they work nice and easily, but there's instances where they just don't work, such as a very sharp angle or a unique angle or curve, something that isn't commercially available. So in this instance, you can see on the right-hand side, I could make the track move enough to get it into the diamond on this side, but obviously on the left-hand side, it just wouldn't fit. That's because this is hand-laid. You can see that this part is straight, this part is curved. Nobody makes a curved one, so this is actually all hand-laid. There's metal ties that cross underneath that the rails are actually soldered directly to.
How would you connect track to form a line?
Well, you've got different kinds of track. You've got snap track and flex track. This is your standard snap track. It's really meant to just simply, as it, when first snaps together, uses rail joiners, and they're a little U-shaped, C-shaped kind of piece of metal. All it does is it slides on the end of the rail. And you have another one that has the same thing, and you just literally line them up just correctly, and you just slide them together. Flex track, same thing, except for that it's 3 foot long. And over here we've got two pieces together. You can see the rail joiners right there. If I pull it apart just a little bit, you can see there's the rail joiners. And again, it holds them together, keeps them in line so that the rails are lined up, and it also conducts electricity so that your trains can move.
What is the difference between how a DCC system works and just a regular DC system?
A DC system, you're basically putting power directly to the track, and then that in turn gives power directly to the engine. Your engines only go in one direction because that's where the power is pushing it, so it's controlling the track, not the engine. Versus a DCC, you've actually got a receiver built inside of the motor, inside the engine itself, that controls the motor directly. This throttle, I've got two different locomotive numbers or addresses called up, one for each engine. So on my left throttle, I've got an engine, and I can control it, versus the one on the right is still stationary, and I can control that one separately, and I can have it go the same direction. I can have it go faster, I can have it go slower, or I can have it go a different direction, because they're different addresses, and it's not responding to the track power, but to the information being sent to it. So with a DCC, you can have it also control more than just the motor. Like, for example, I can turn on the headlights individually. I can have it ring a bell, blow the horn, or I can have it rev the engine as I move.
Understanding how grueling the process of track laying can be will give you a better understanding of project timelines and patience for life in general. Scenery is the finishing touch that makes a layout feel alive. Without it, there isn't a sense of being transported to somewhere else, which many in the hobby enjoy. Lighting can be used to make it seem like the layout is entering a different time of day. For example, this is what the layout looks like under normal lighting. However, if you add a soft blue light, it can make it seem like the layout is in nighttime. A common challenge layouts face is empty spaces. By filling these spaces, you make it seem like there's more going on than just the trains, giving the layout a sense of life. Here are some examples of how we filled empty spaces at the club.
So my mixture of my trees are normally a mixture of fine turf and then the bushy stuff. I'll mix it with also different colors, like a finer browns, and then I will also put in lighter greens, and I'll also mix in a little bit of red for having like birds and stuff, just to give it another realistic level. Because if you look at a tree, they're not all one solid green. There are multiple different colors of green mixed in there together. When you have one color green, they don't look real. So then when you're doing a tree, this is a common weed that you find around Wisconsin. You just kind of pull it apart and it already looks like a tree from this point. With these, you do have to let them dry over the winter or the summer. I've been finding that it's about 6 months if it's in a basement, 3 months if it's out in a garage or more drier area. So what I'll do is I'll take my spray adhesive and I'll spray the tops of it first. And then I'll take a nice dip. Then I shake it off. And then I take hairspray. I'm gonna get that around all the edges. It's just another form to lock in everything. And then I'll take another dip. Now when you're doing this, you do not want to push the AstroTurf onto the trees because you'll break all of the fine little vessels that are down here that attach it to the main part. And then I like to try to keep my hands as close to the top of it as I possibly can to protect this part from getting covered in the AstroTurf so that it actually looks like the bark. And then I'll let this one sit and dry for at least 72 hours, and then I come back and I spray them again with adhesive spray and then hairspray. I find with the hairspray, it tends to keep everything clumped together, but then you don't get the shine that you do with glue. When you're using glue, you get this weird little shine over everything that kind of makes it look fake. And then I just continue the process.
For grass and ground coverings, there's three main kinds. You've got your older fashioned style, which would be a stained sawdust, usually stained kind of a greenish blue. You can get ground foam rubber, which comes in several different shades of greens through yellows and tans. And you can do static grass, which is a long, thin nylon or artificial piece of wire, basically, that receives a static charge when you put a voltage to it, and it stands up on end like weeds. So weathering, you can see, is a bit of a difference. You've got a regular train car that isn't weathered at all, kind of a flat black. This one has a kind of a white sprayed on wash, kind of done with either an airbrush or a spray paint. And then I've got rust streaks that are done with a dry brush, which is paint that's starting to dry as you brush it on. This one has a bit of a white wash. It's actually a thinned white color, either a paint or an ink that's put on to get the appearance of a stain versus just simply dirt and dust. This is a little bit more of the same thing. These cars were spray painted with a real light mist to give it kind of a yellow, dusty color. And then I added in some rust streaks that are dry brushed on. You can see kind of a difference between some mildly weathered ones versus something that's heavily weathered. This has a lot of different rust streaks, a couple different colors on it to try and make it look very aged and used. This particular car is done with a combination of inks that are thinned and dabbed on and dry brushing. You can see the ink washing on the top, some ink washes and dry brushes down the bottom, and then just what they call stippling, which is where you take a brush that's almost dry and you just literally stab the car with it so it looks like mud that's been thrown on and rust holes and such. This is a car that I've always heard it called reduction weathering. We put on a lot of a coloring either in a paint or an acrylic that's drying up, and then you wipe off the excess instead of adding to it. Another one that's done is dry pastels, and they usually come like this. It's just a dry, chalky powder. I use a toothbrush to put it on. You can see that when you put it on, it gets kind of a chalky look to it. It's great for certain kinds of cars that'd be loading dry products like calcium, sometimes flour, cement products and such, but it gives it kind of a dryish look, and you can see that it shows up real nice on a dark car.
Having attention to detail is important in everything. It will allow you to better present projects and yourself. Wiring is important because it's what makes the layout work. Without it, signals wouldn't light, switches couldn't be autonomized, and the trains would not be able to move.
We've got a recent repair of a wire soldered right to the side of the rail, and we've got a rail joiner that's soldered into place to carry power from one piece of track to another. Underneath the layout, we've got several terminal strips where power gets tapped off of.
What are some of the functions of wiring besides powering the track?
Well, you can have different accessories such as turnouts that are controlled over the local net, turntables. You might have other things like lights in buildings that can be turned on and off. Those are usually done with a stationary decoder.
How does communication between the track and a DCC system work?
So there's two basic components that are all coordinated through a command station. You've got a communication network, DCC, such as Digitrax uses a local net. On the local net side, it gets all its commands from a throttle or from a computer, sends it off to the command station, which then deciphers it, sends it then back to the power district, which then sends it to the rails, where your engines would be sitting on there and would receive it on a decoder, or it would go to a stationary decoder, such as something that would power turnouts or other accessories.
Well, not all hobbies have as much electrical work as model railroading. Having an understanding of circuitry is a good skill to have. Everyone has different tastes when it comes to how their engines run, sound, and how many they run at once. For example, you can change the way your horn sounds by changing the CV value on the decoder. You can also change how much momentum your engine has. A low value will make it stop quicker, while a larger value will make it roll for longer. Lastly, by matching the speed tables of two engines, you can speed match them. This is useful for if you want to use multiple engines to run a single train. Changing settings on your engine brings a new aspect to your layout. And being able to use computer programs is essential in an ever more technological world. If you would like to see an in-depth video on an individual skill, leave a comment below, and we will get working on it as soon as possible. This is our address and the hours we are open. If you stop by, remember to sign in and put YouTube as the reason for your visit. Remember, donations are appreciated. Thank you for watching our video, and we'll see you soon.